If you guys have been wanting to play AQ3D with a controller, hopefully this video is going to help you guys out. If you enjoy it, do me a favor and tap that like button, smash the subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of my uploads. Let's get started. First thing you're going to want to do is check right up here, big picture mode, and activate it. Once you're inside here, you're going to head up to the settings, and in the controller settings, you're going to be configuring or turning on one of these things. Now, I have a PlayStation 4 controller, so I enabled this. If you have an Xbox, do this, switch, generic, depending on what you have. And then you can leave there. Once you're back at the main menu, go to the library, and then you can go into your AQ3D. Now, you can also go into games to get to it as well. Once in there, you're going to the manage game, and you're going to be going up to controller configuration. You do have controller options, although I have not touched anything in there. Once you get in here, things can get a little bit tricky. Now, if you are using a PlayStation controller, you can go down to Browse Configs, and in the Community tab, go right down here, and you're going to be finding this right here. This is the setup that I use on my main account, and so you can just use this. This will automatically be setting your controller configuration to the one that I use. Now, if you don't like my controller configuration, you can change it however you want. Depending on what controller you use, these setups might be slightly different, but hopefully this video will give you the general idea of how to set it up. First, we're going to be starting with the start button or the options button, depending on what controller you've got. And in here, you'd be typing in the name that you want and then the button you want to associate it with. In this case, I put it for the main menu, so it's this right here, with it, which is the escape. Next is the bumpers and the triggers. That's at the very top of the controller, and I have the first one linked. So this is the setup right here. So you can freeze frame this if you want. And I don't have full pull on. I have soft pull. I have soft pull trigger on hair trigger, so it's just a very quick little thing. Soft pull is set to there, so you can just basically copy this exact layout if you want. In the soft pull action, you go into here, and then you associate the button. Now, for the first attack, for the auto attack is #1 on the keyboard. So then I typed in the thing. For the second ability, this is the bumper, and I just typed in ability, and it is the #2 because that's the second ability. Third ability, same thing. And the fourth ability, which is a trigger, so I put it on the soft pull action, same setup as the other one. For the always thing, I'm just going to leave that blank. This is the analog buttons. Now again, it's going to be depending, it could be up here or it might be down here, but either one, this is what you're going to be associating it with. So this is the directional pad. So when you've got this selected, make sure it's on directional pad, and you're going to be going on the 8-way overlap. For these 4 things here, each one of these are going to be different. So the very first is the top one. This is the inventory. So this is going to bring up your inventory when you interact with the top button. And it's I, because that is the associated button. Next is the one at the bottom, and I have this for loot, which is the F. So this brings up the loot. Now, it doesn't grab the loot, but it does bring up the loot. I think if you tap it again, it grabs the loot, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Next is the left button, and this is buffs, which I have associated with Z or Z. And the reason why is because this is the very first tab, the first available slot beside the cross skill. So you've got the cross skill, and then you have the first available slot. This is associated with that. Next is your health potions, and this is associated with X, which is the next available slot right beside buffs. So you've got the cross skill, buffs, and then health. That's how I have it associated, which helps because it's in the proper way. Next, we're going to be doing the left analog stick. And again, this is directional pad, which might surprise some people, but this is how it's set up. You're going to have the 8-way overlap, and down here, you've got the click option. This is also very important because I want to be able to travel when I'm moving around. I want to be able to interact with my travel forms immediately. So I've had the click option, which is clicking down on the analog stick basically, which is associated with V, which is for travel form, and that is the travel form, so I typed that in. For these ones here, it was actually pretty easy. It's just the W, which is move forward, E, which is to move to the right. I've set this up to be very similar to shooters or third-person games, so that's why I have it like that. The S is right here, so you have it S, which is the to move backwards, and then last but not least, Q, which is to move to the left. So that's your movements with that controller. And next we're moving into this one right here. Again, this is set on the directional pad with a 4-way no overlap. This is set like that, so you don't have to touch anything there. So first we're going to do the top one. This is this button right here. This is the scroll button, so it zooms in. And then this one right here is the zooming back. So you can either zoom in by clicking it forward, moving it forward with the right analog stick. You'll be zooming in on your character, or zooming out on your character using those. And then you have your D. So this is moving your camera. So when you're moving forward and then you're moving your right analog stick to the left or to the right, it's changing the camera behind the character, thus in turn moving your character to look that direction when you're moving that direction. So it's a coordination thing, but this is the way that a lot of third person stuff is, which is why I have it set up like that. A is the other one as well, which again is the camera controls. So the movement is completely on the other end. The movement is on this, or sorry, this option right here is all for the movement. This is for camera controls. What the heck is C? Maybe C is one of the other. I'm not even sure what this is, to be honest. I thought that was cross skill, but cross skill is R, so I'm not sure what C is. I'll have to figure that out when I get back in game. For these ones, it's pretty simple. You're going to be using the button pad, and the top one is R, which is the cross skill. And then you're going to be going with the ultimate, which is the 5th. Might be a little weird for some people, but if you have the top 4 being the basic attacks, and then the X or the square, depending on which one you use, is for the ultimate. And then you've got the cross skill on the top. This one over here is for target swap. So if you're trying to swap through your targets who's available, you'd be tapping the B button or the O button, depending on what controller you're using. And then last but not least, jump. Now that is a staple button. Is that the A button or the X button is the jump, depending. So that is why I set it up, which is a space bar associated with that. For those of you with a touchpad like the 4, I do have this set up. So I have it set on mouse with the click. So if you tap it, it's going to do the left mouse button thing. And I have all these. This is just the way that it's set up. So this is for the mouse controls of the pad right here. But if you don't have a touchpad, then you don't need to bother with that. Last but not least is this button right here. Now this is the share button. This is where it gets a little bit important if you play PvP. And so what you'd be doing is going into here. First of all, you have the regular press. This is the loot also. There we go. That's what's associated with it. So the F button was to open up the loot inventory, the loot thing that I showed earlier. But then you can loot it all just by pressing this button right here, one regular press. And that's going to be doing that. Leave these all on default. But if you hold this button down, so you set it up to long press because you're given several different options. You can double press, you can regular press, but I have it set up for long press, and I did this by opening up an add activator, and that was how I was able to get this. And then I have it binds right here. So everything else here is set the way. I didn't touch anything here, and I don't believe I touched this either. All I did was change this. Change to PvP. And this is a bind right here. Now, what I did for that was I set up a different action. I opened up an action set right here. So I created a new one just for PvP. And basically what I did was I literally copied my first one, so everything else is all the same. The only difference is this is now a target. I can now target somebody, but it's not a target swap. Target swap cycles through everybody. Target cycles to the closest individual. So it's a little bit different. So I had that set up, and then the big difference were these abilities right here, because in PvP you're given more abilities. So everything else is the same except for this one and this. You don't open up inventory when you're in PvP, and you don't loot when in PvP. So there's no sense in having those buttons, which is why I only have these two buttons. This is a setup right here, and for the first one, you go into here. That's PvP 2, which is linked to the C button. This is the second ability, the second PvP ability that you have. Now for me, I usually associate the second one with healing, and because that's usually what I use for healing. And then for this one here, this is my first ability, my first PvP ability, which is usually dash or something like that. So I associate my healing one is always my right one, and then my other one is the left one, which would either be a buff or a dash, depending on what I'm using. Sometimes it's not dash, but again, this was only for PvP. This is, you don't need to have this if you're not going to be setting up for PvP. But if you are deciding to play with for PvP, this would be a nice extra setup. And so when you're in the PvP action set, you would then need to set this up the same. Well, actually, this I didn't touch. This is the same. This is what I had to change, because I had to change the binding to default, which you're given the option when you do that. You have this option right here. So you come right to this thing right here, and then you can change the action set to what it is that you want it set to. Now, because I already have it set properly, I don't need to touch anything. Hopefully I've explained everything in here, and if you want to change things up, if you feel like changing some of the things because you don't like the way that they are, feel free to change anything you want. After playing with your controller for a while, you can go down to export, and then you can go into community and you can export it. Now keep in mind, you need to be playing with it for at least 5 minutes before you can publish it, but once you've done that, just hit your share configuration and others can use your controller, which would be easier for them not having to set it all up if you've set it up, you know, the way that people would like it. Just make sure when you're in the game to check the button layout and make sure that they are synced to what they are in the controller. But that is it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Keep those swords swinging.